Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CT Sports Talent Show. My name is Christopher Saunders, and I'm pleased to have on, this is the first time I've ever had on a commissioner of anything. And obviously, high school, there's really no commissioners. College, there is, obviously, the pros. But this one is, a new conference. Used to be known as the CCC. Now it's the CNE Conference of New England. I've got Patrick Colbert with me. Patrick, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm glad to break the mold for you. I appreciate you having me on.
I've had this podcast since 2020 when COVID kind of struck. I started it to give voices to the high school, the college, and so on, players from the state of Connecticut to kind of voice their thoughts about just dealing with COVID. And it kind of dealt to now, going into seasons, doing previews, giving kids and everybody a platform. So this is really a lot of fun. And I really appreciate being able to, have conversations with you. So, Patrick, tell me a little bit about kind of before we get into the conference itself, the new one. Take me into just the process of renaming a conference, which has been known for a long time as the previous CCC. How did that go about?
Yeah, it's a really a unique type of rebrand that we went through, and I say that because it wasn't a situation where we as a conference and a group of leaders and our presidents thought, it's we were proud of what we were, and we were coming up on a kind of a critical, two-way, uh, two different ways to look at things. One, we can continue to be what we are, change how we operate. I think the landscape of how college athletics is operating is ever evolving, and we certainly want to be on the forefront of that. But I think the organic way to really solidify how you want to position yourself is by resetting. And the obviously the most public way to do that is a name change and a whole visual rebrand. Actually, day one on the job, I had a meeting with the president
Mhm.
and we talked about it. And it seemed to gain a little bit more traction from two ways. One, the strategic pathway, where let's see what how we can re-identify ourselves and how that definition kind of takes us into this new way of how Division III should operate.
Mhm.
And two, the practical side of things. We were the Commonwealth Coast Conference for 40 years. We're celebrating the 40th year of what was a tremendously successful conference in our region. Um, However, it didn't fit our makeup anymore. If you look at the name,
Mhm.
we not all of our schools were in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Not all of our schools are coastal per se. So that aside, that kind of combined with our ability to take a look at, okay, philosophically, let's start to ask ourselves some hard questions about how we want to be aggressive with how we operate, how we look at things. The traditional model for Division III conference office, I think, and our leaders think is different. Um, a kind of an aggressive first step to that is to look at what is important to our schools, what can position ourselves in our region to kind of make a statement that we feel like we are a premier conference regionally, nationally.
Mhm.
And the key component that we kept coming back to was our region, our coaches, our presidents, our admissions counselors are out there
Mhm.
recruiting students, recruiting student athletes, and the thing that we consistently heard is that they're bringing people to the region. We're in a very thickly settled. When I say thickly settled, I mean Division III, Division II, Division I institutions. It's very academically rich in New England, so why not just take that on and become the Conference of New England? So that's where we landed. It was a very collaborative process that took a lot of input, and oftentimes it's an interesting situation where you're trying to make sure the right voices are heard, and also managing expectations on the feedback you're going to get, and also ensuring that the communication of what the narrative behind the rebrand, which is what we're really doing now, is communicated effectively. And I consistently say to our staff, our members, that that is the most important part of this. We can say what the name is, we can launch a new logo, but
Mhm.
the context behind why we did it is just as important. So it's it's uh it's ongoing, but it was an exciting, it was a fun process, and I'm really proud of how it turned out.
You know, when I saw that the conference was being renamed, now when I bring up these examples, these are not conferences, but these were teams that renamed themselves. I remember when the Tampa Bay Devil Rays became the Tampa Bay Rays and they made it to the World Series in 2008. They lost to the Phillies. I thought about the Commanders. They were known as the Redskins. Now, obviously, they've gone through various changes within their organization from within. Hopefully, brighter days ahead for them. But when I think about kind of when you change the name of a team, and in this case, a conference, there kind of brings that like new, even though it's still the same in sense of like the teams in the conference and such, it brings, like you said, some freshness. It's new, and then with the with social media too, you kind of have that as far as the attention. People are like, "Oh, it's new. Let me check it out. Let me see it," and so on. And like you said, a lot of the teams are obviously in the New England part of the country of the USA. So being able to have that too is kind of like it's like an eye catcher almost, right? Not to say that the previous name wasn't an eye catcher, but I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. The Conference of New England kind of catches my eye a little bit quicker than the Commonwealth Coast Conference because it's like, okay, well, how does that correlate to a kid from, let's say, Connecticut or Maine or New Hampshire? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and that's exactly kind of the challenge that we saw, before we started this process. Is that again, we're not naive to the fact that college athletics in all divisions is fluid,
Mm,
and that's going to force institutions to make some hard decisions, whether that's divisionally realigning themselves, whether that's choosing to make unfortunate decisions that take away programs,
mhm,
and then in itself causes some conference realignment. And we wanted to make sure that we were positioning ourselves in a way that allowed our institutions to be obviously recognized the correct way, and in an intentional and a strategic way, but also allowing ourselves to position to be kind of open to certain things that maybe the Commonwealth Coast Conference didn't allow us to be, and to be able to kind of extend the reach of any prospective membership inquiries outside of what we were, um, to the entire region, is a good first step. And I think, quite honestly, what we were as the Commonwealth Coast Conference built a lot of brand equity, and I think there was a lot of pause at first to say, well, we certainly don't want to relinquish that because there was a lot of good that was done in recent years, a lot of good that has been done. When I say that, we've had nationally, some really nationally, you know, we were in a position to host Frozen Fours. We were in a position to win Elite Eight games in men's basketball. We've been, one of our institutions has been in the College World Series 2 years in a row. So I think it's capitalizing off of that. And there was the concern that, well, if we do this, is that going to be forgotten? And that's why the unique opportunity to take that and kind of combine it with what we're calling our 40th year anniversary that we're going to launch here soon, recognizes the past. It kind of reminds people that the same makeup of institutions is coming with us. This is not a new conference with new institutions. It's the same committed group that's looking to do things differently, that's looking to identify under a new name and how we're going to take things forward. So that was equally as important. But so you talk about rebrands at the professional or any level. I think there's always that concern that are you going to, and certainly there's different nuances behind the why of a rebrand. And, the Commanders is a different one. The Tampa Bay Rays is one. You look at some of the collegiate rebrands and it's political, it's religious, especially at the institutional level on why you need to do certain things. This was purely um, because we didn't think we were identifying the correct way as what our membership was and how we want to move forward. And I think we really did a nice job of making it clear that we feel like we are the conference of New England.
I was just while you were talking, I was trying to pull up and I was able to find the teams because I wanted to get a refresher of who was in as far as in the
Sure.
conference. And I saw Suffolk, and it's funny because when I played baseball going back to 2011 to 2015 for Albertus, they are still part of the GNAC. Suffolk was at the time a part of the GNAC, and I remember when I was playing for all sports, it wasn't just baseball. Suffolk, you had St. Joe's, you had Johnson and Wales, they were amongst the top teams
Yeah.
it came to basketball, baseball, and so on. And then I knew about Suffolk leaving, and now obviously with them being now, at the time CCC, now the Conference of New England, I think that's pretty cool. You have a nice balance. I want to go to the logo because I think that's another part that people kind of, when I look at the logo, I think of, and I don't know how much TV you watch. I know you're busy with what you have with your family and obviously what you're doing with the conference. But I remember watching an episode of Bar Rescue, and John Taffer talked about, and I know it's funny, but it makes sense. He talked about when he was trying to rebrand different bars, the eye catching, right? How does it make sense to the community, right? If you are in Texas, you're not going to have a bunch of New York stuff up, as far as, memorabilia or anything like that, because it doesn't make sense. You want to have barbecue sauce cocktails, you want to have food that fits to that, right? So when I look at the logo and I see the light tower, that screams to me New England for a multitude of ways. Not the mountains because we don't live in the West, not, other different kind of things. The lighthouse I think was a perfect logo for this conference. What says you?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think that was one of the more complex decisions we had to make behind this the entire rebrand, because of
Mhm.
exactly the things you're saying. We wanted to make sure that our mark identified with a couple things. Obviously, the region, and there's a lot of different symbolic things you can look at when you think of New England, whether it's the fall, the history behind our region. You can start to pull a lot of different landmarks that are in our region. But ultimately, what it came down to is we wanted to make sure we were being inclusive to the locations that we're actually in, and we range from cities. We've got institutions in Boston, Hartford, coming in Johnson and Wales next year in Providence, and then we're in rural areas: Beverly, Mass, Wenham, Mass, Dudley, Mass. We're up in Maine, so we're covering a lot of different points of the region. So it was important for us to make sure that we recognize that and remembered that, along with the diverse demographics that we have in our student bodies. I mean, there are students coming from obviously international, domestic locations that we want to make sure, student athlete or not, that they
Mm.
feel that they can identify with the mark, because our conference is a representation of all of our institutions and the different constituents that they have on their campuses. So it was important for us to find that, that really primary thing that connected us all. What I love about the lighthouse specifically is the metaphorical piece behind it, because our hashtag is lead as one, and as we went through the process, one of the key pillars philosophically that we really are going to pride ourselves on is being kind of innovative in thought, strategic in nature, and leaders in the industry. And what that means is, it can mean a lot of different things. It can be proactive in how you approach certain legislation that might be coming out from the NCAA, how innovative you are in approaching revenue generating ideas, etc. But I think what I like about that is, when you think of a lighthouse, you're obviously seeing what's coming.
Mhm.
You've got somebody who is at the top of the lighthouse, that's shining a light on, okay, this is what I see in front of me. How do we need to navigate what's coming next? And how do I communicate that effectively? Who do I need to? It's a pure definition of how we as a conference want to unite through this rebrand and next phase,
Mhm.
and how we're going to approach it. And the lighthouse, again, quite simply put, is a good symbol of the region. But again, to reiterate what I said earlier, I think the most important part is allowing people to understand the context behind the metaphorical side of the lighthouse, and also visually. It's a good primary piece to any logo. It kind of stands out. We do have mountains in the logo, because I mean we are in a mountainous region, as you go north, and we've got associate members and core members in Maine. We've got schools and associate members in New Hampshire. So it was important to kind of bring that logo together, and that tied it together for us.
I want to talk about logistically because whenever there's going to be a switch, right, there's going to
Hmm.
be people, like you said, some people will buy in, some people won't. Now, obviously, Division 3 is much different than Division 1, 2, where you're competing more so higher Division 2, but obviously Division 1. I don't know how much sports you watch as far as the Division 1 level, but when you look at the Power 4 conferences, used to be five, but the Pac-12 is now the Pac-2, no longer a power conference. You got the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12. I see some of the record numbers with those contract deals with ESPN, ABC, and the whole nine, Fox Sports, and all that. And it's just amazing, right? But obviously, Division 3, you don't really have to deal with that. But at the same time, there's still like obviously there's money to be able to be acquired. There's obviously ways to be, streaming is the biggest thing, not just with like I know football is starting tonight with Kansas City and the Ravens. I'm sure there's a way to stream it somehow. That's a big thing with the NFL, MLB, NBA is now into it. Do you think this name, and I don't know how much streaming you guys did before, so I apologize. Do you feel like having this, the rebranding in a sense, do you think that can kind of bring some new ways to kind of expand now, both the teams and the sports? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I think it certainly can. I don't know if it, obviously nothing's automatic in life, and coming from Division 1 myself, I personally saw you know what goes into creating value as a conference, and I think that's the most important thing. Is our name could be Timbuktu, but if we aren't getting it done on the field and in the classroom and creating value in other ways through, secondary programming, through leadership development, through our student athlete leaders on campus, and showing that we are willing to do things and think differently, then I really don't think that you can optimize your monetary value. And I think one thing that I personally have pushed our group to at least think about more is the traditional model of Division 3 athletics. And obviously, what I love about Division 3 and being a Division 3 student athlete is that the amateuristic model is still exists. In Division 1, we know that where that is now, and it's unfortunate for kind of the purists like me at least. And coming back to Division 3, I really wanted to ensure that that balance it can happen where that can be maintained. But let's not forget that what these student athletes are doing can create a lot of value and be the front porch for institutions. And if the rebrand helps that, and I think what it does do is it reinforces a commitment athletically, on its face, to our student athletes on our campuses, that your presidents, your athletic directors, your coaches, all those different constituents have committed towards this change, which at its face, again, is just a name change. So, but what that means and why we did that, to philosophically think about things differently, is to help support you in your journey over the 4, 5, 6 years that you can be on campus now. That we're willing to evolve with that. So I think it can help. It's certainly not automatic, but I think there's a lot to be done in continuing to push that narrative, while also, again, navigating these uncharted waters of what Division 3 can be. It's an exciting time. It's a scary time for some, because nobody should be naive to the fact that what's happening at the Division 1 level, there's going to be a trickle down effect. We're not all, we don't have the crystal ball in front of us, but I think we can see what's coming. It might be 3, 5, 7 years down the road of what the cost of a Division 1 student athlete is really going to mean to some of these institutions that have either transitioned or that are at the mid-major level, and then how that impacts Division 3, could honestly be a benefit to some of our Division 3 brethren and conferences. And how do we set ourselves up to handle that and support that is really where we want to end up at the end of the day.
Like you said, Johnson and Wales from the GNAC will be coming over. I think you said next year, not this year,
Yeah.
next year. The University of Hartford was originally in Division One, then they had to drop for various reasons. So I almost feel like, the way that the conference is looking, obviously right now will be different next year. Then who knows? You could be continuously adding. I mean, I always feel like, I know it started a long time ago as far as teams going to different conferences and such. But now I feel like, obviously what happens in Division One gets all the attention, and then it's like a trickle down effect, seeing teams go from here to there, so on and so forth. Could you picture this conference, obviously with the new name, and then potentially having new teams over the course of however long that you are here? Do you think that the more teams, like the better in a sense to kind of continuously grow, or is it going to be like, okay, we want a set number, like I know, for example, the Big 12 was talking about UConn. They said we're just going to pause that. I think that's probably for the better. But they
Mhm.
want to keep the number. I know the SEC wants to keep their number as well. They just wanted to have Oklahoma and Texas. They didn't want to have
Right.
anybody else. Is that something that you can share, or just not right now?
No, I think it's a fair question, and I always, when I get that question, and I think other commissioners probably have similar thoughts, is there's no perfect number out there. I'm certainly not one, and our presidents are of the same mindset that we're not going to just add to add, just to get to that number, whatever that magic number is, if it's 16, 14, if it's 12. From a scheduling perspective, obviously, an even number is always ideal. But I think um, we are positioned in a way as a conference that I think we are fortunate to have such an exclusive group of committed institutions that are like-minded in their approach to athletics, the development of their students and student athletes, that we feel good about where we are right now. Now, does that mean we aren't certainly considering opportunities? No. Every commissioner in the country at all levels is certainly working with their presidents and athletic directors to make sure that membership maintains. And also, you're looking, at opportunities that might be in front of you. But I do think that we are in a committed position as a membership to be exclusive, to certainly look at opportunities in a certain way where if they start to make sense and they start to and if it shows that it's going to create some value for us in a number of different ways, create some efficiencies in terms of sports sponsorship, which is massive at this level, and certainly some of our lower sponsored sports, then yeah, that's a discussion that we have to have. But it's got to make sense for us. And certainly, as we all know, memberships vet that to the nth degree, as they should. But I think, for me, most importantly, it's got to create value. It's got to make sense practically. It can't be something that we do just for the math of it at the end of the day. And I think I've seen that at numbers of levels,
Mhm.
where it's kind of a catch at the end of the day. But long term, what's that effect? And did that work at the end of it? And I think being creative and not thinking that we just need to look here for prospective members. Again, back to what I initially said, I think there's going to be opportunities that come from other places that all commissioners at our level are just at least keeping their eye on. And and I think that's smart if you are.
Pat, I really appreciate you coming on. I don't want to keep you too long, but this was a great conversation. I have a bunch of more questions, but again, I don't want to
Yeah.
keep you. I really appreciate you coming on. This was a blast. Congratulations on what you've done, and I really look forward to, obviously with me broadcasting high school games, occasionally some college. I try to keep track of the college game, especially Division III, because obviously you have the NESCAC, you've got the LEC, the GNAC, obviously now the Conference of New England. Like I try to keep track of D3 because even though it's Division III, there's some obviously great programs. The talent I think is very good, and it's especially somebody who played Division III sports, especially baseball. I want to give as much props and my flowers to those young men and women who are competing. But Pat, I really appreciate you coming on, man.
No, thanks for having me, Chris. Anytime. Great conversation, and I really appreciate all that you're doing for not only Connecticut sports but for Division III and all that we're trying to accomplish out here.
I appreciate that. You enjoy the rest of your night. That wraps things up here in the CT Sports Talent Show. So next time, stay safe. Remember, CT stands for Connecticut Talent. Enjoy and find them all. Enjoy the show, everybody, and be well.